Yeah, let's do it. All right. Okay. So this is Platonic Academy of Melbourne, Plato's Republic, winter 2020, week 6, the final week. We're still in lockdown, and we're going to discuss today democracy and tyranny. Okay. But we're actually going to talk about a little bit more, guys, because last week we ran out of time in an interesting discussion about same and other, one and not one, and all that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do this week is, if Effie, are you interested in going? Where's Effie? You interested in going first, or do you want to just come in after me? It's up to you.
Either after, before, I don't mind.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking after we talked, then maybe you'd have a little bit more time and we can go into the wine on your thing if it goes on a bit. Oh, sorry, the drink of choice. Yeah, okay. Well, look, let's do that then. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go back to the education program thing, from the mathematics to the dialectic, because that's important. Then do the democracy tyranny thing, which was the reading this week. And then we'll move to Effie's prepared something special, and I got a couple of slides for her too, if she wants to use them, on the myth of which is right at the end of kind of like the last book, which is itself kind of like an appendix. And there's been a lot of interest in this group and elsewhere about the myth of So I'm very pleased that Effie's had a look into it, and she's going to give us a little bit of an introduction. She feels like she could go on about it for a whole, 6-week program probably, but we're just going to get a wee introduction, aren't we, Effie?
Hopefully.
Okay. All right.
Hopefully I can keep it short.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can just take it as it goes. Okay, so remember the education program that we were up to last time. So this was like, what is a philosopher? And then there's a realization, well, we've really got to train the philosopher. Someone can have the philosopher nature, but it's corrupted by society. So we need a special education program that turns the mind-eye around. So turns the mind-eye around, like in the cave, where you stand up and you turn around and you go on the process and become enlightened. So with this, he started with arithmetic, because he said arithmetic actually embraces all the sciences. And then he took us back to the one, and the one out of which all the numbers emerge. And so this is no ordinary one, as he was saying, and this is what we were discussing last week. This is a special one, which at the same time seems to also have its opposite. So the one and the opposite are almost present at the same time. And so when he was explaining this, we were discussing, he brought up in the discussion various opposites, thicker and not thicker, softer and harder, and that sort of thing. So after the discussion last week, I thought I might just do a little riff on that and relate it to when we were doing taller and shorter last time. So, so one of the things was soft. And, think of when you ask the question, someone says, oh, is that soft? Right? So you might be saying, well, I've got my cappuccino here. Is the froth on it soft? Yes or no? Or you might be in the shop and you say, is the avocado soft? Or you might be a runner and you're going for a run. You say, I prefer bitumen to running on concrete because bitumen is soft. The road is soft. So you can see how what we're doing here when we're talking about the surface you're running on. You're talking about softness on a certain scale compared to whether the froth on the cappuccino is soft, right? So when I say, oh, the road's soft, you know what I mean. When I say the avocado soft, you know what I mean. You know what sort of grade of softness we're talking about. So the point here is a bit like the taller and shorter one with Simmias and Phaedo and Socrates, where it doesn't matter where you draw, it matters where you draw the line, right? taller and shorter, softer or harder. But no matter where you draw the line, softer or harder, taller or shorter, heavier or lighter stays the same. We know what you're talking about when you say taller, softer, harder. They're different forms. When you apply them, they have a specificity to them, but they're different forms in themselves. And really, that's what Plato's starting with anyway. And it's what a lot of people miss. You won't generally get this, just that basic explanation when you do Plato at university. And that's a real shame because people don't really understand what the forms are about. And that's a basic characteristic of the forms. So they're all forms. Now, this also relates to another weird sort of thing. It looks really simple, where he's talking about number. And I'll just share a screen here. Let me try this. Okay. And let's go to slideshow. Okay. So there was this thing where he was saying, some silly people think that the one can be divided. And you think like, yeah, one pizza can be divided. It can be divided into thirds or quarters or whatever. But again, it's coming back to this notion of form with softer and harder and that sort of thing. And the claim is that one in itself cannot be divided. Only things that are called one can be divided. And the problem for Plato sees is that we tend to have this very strong materialistic, if you like, association of the numbers or the forms or whatever else, where we think it's a particular thing. So he says, one itself can't be divided. Only the things we call one are divided, like the pizza. And so if we divided the pizza, oh, say quarters here, and then I'm showing thirds. I'm showing quarters as well. This means that one is now applied to the part that is one part of four. So you play with the mathematics in order to apply it to the particular situation. It's very simple, but the simplicity of it hides the fact that it is a big step in the way we're thinking, a step away to see that the forms have this separate reality, and that reality then, this next step then, is that reality is actually the reality of the basis of everything, which you can't see in these particular examples, but that's the claim. So the one doesn't divide, but it emanates. And the difference is kind of difficult to explain here now, but it's not dividing, it's becoming other. And by becoming other, then it differentiates and so on. On the right of this screen, on my right, is the Lamboid diagram, which is important in Platonism. And there's a sense in which that the 2 and the half and the 3 and the 1 are considered to be kind of the same, in the same way as they are in the pizza. So you divide the pizza into 3 thirds, you divide it into 4 quarters. And then the unity, if you imagine there's a unity running right down the middle here. So 2 times half is 1, 3 times half is 1, 4 times. And so this is this kind of symmetry going on there that is important for them, and that we can explain a bit more when we finally do the geometry class. So that's that stuff. And you know, I'm Martha. I'm doing that one to add to our discussion last week, and maybe you know, we can continue the discussion in the questions on that topic. So it's actually kind of in a way a very simple point and not a very elaborate one, but important. It's all about simplicity. So let's move on now to the hierarchy of the sciences. So we start with the one, and then the emanation from the one of the odds and evens, the alternation of the odds and evens. This is Platonic emanationism. And then the hierarchy of the sciences are according to the hierarchy of the dimensions. So there's the science of the one, which we've been discussing. There's the science of the linear emanation of the odd and even numbers as they oscillate out. And then the next science is plane geometry, where you're moving in two directions, right? You're moving across and up, if you like. And solid geometry, where you're moving across and up and out, or whatever it is. And then astronomy, as he describes it, is the science of solids moving in time. So he describes it as time as the fourth dimension, and astronomy is the science of the fourth dimension. So if anyone knows any mathematics, it's basically equations of the first degree, second degree, third degree, and fourth degree. And that's how he considers the hierarchy. Now, he makes a special mention of a couple of, well, there's like a narrative emphasis on solid geometry. He jumps over it at first. And then he says, well, I did that because, well, you know, people aren't very interested in it. States aren't very interested in it. But there's a hint that actually we are. And most people see this as a hint to Plato saying, well, we're doing a lot of work in this in the academy. And I don't know whether people have heard of the Platonic solids. This is one of the outcomes of the work there, although, of course, it's a lot of the stuff that they worked on isn't original with the academy. And you can actually see some of the Platonic solids in stones from the Stone Age. So they're not new. And they're also not new in nature. They're just on the theme of viruses. Actually, a lot of people in the sacred geometry feeds make a bit of a fuss about the geometry of viruses. So these solids here, they've got uniform sides. I think that's the main thing to say. So they are the only objects that have the solid objects that have the uniform sides. Okay, that's not quite the definition because you could have concave, but anyway, that's basically it. So he makes a fuss about that for that reason. So that's kind of interesting there. And then another one that's interesting is that he makes a very, he says, well, there's astronomy. And he said, no, I don't mean the astronomy like looking up at the stars like Socrates was, the philosophers were mocked by Aristophanes. I mean, actually looking up, the soul looking up. So it's getting back to it, the whole thing about the turning around or the looking up or pointing down. The pointing up doesn't literally mean pointing up to the sky. It's the mind's eye looking up to the form. So he makes a special point of this. And basically what he's saying is astronomy is the mathematics behind astronomy, the particular astronomy. So he's saying the pure mathematics, that is the basis on which we measure the planets and how they move and everything. Well, that is the astronomy I'm talking about. So he's talking about the pure mathematics. Okay, and then he brings in musical harmony as a branch of astronomy because musical harmony, let me just move on there. Because musical harmony is the science of moving strings in this case. Generally speaking, they looked at the vibration in strings, but they realized that it was a very higher principle than that. And so actually the Pythagoreans and Plato did a lot of research into the science of harmony, and realized that it was all about ratio or logos, and they invented scales that have survived. The Pythagorean scale has survived to this day. So kind of just some interesting things about what he's presenting here. Okay, so that then brings us to dialectic. So what happens, the drama of the story goes something like this. So Glaucon says, well, you know, like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in there. Socrates, is a big program of education. And Socrates says, well, you know, what do you mean? This mathematics? This mathematics is just a prelude to the theme. Mathematics is not enough. A mathematician can be as good at mathematics, but still not fully turned around to the noetic. Again, this thing. So mathematics can help you turn around, but people can be good at mathematics and not be turned around. Like perhaps today's mathematicians, they're not all Platonists. So it's dialectic that brings this all together, all that we've been talking about together, and it finds the common relationships in all this. It finds, if you like, the elementary form of all this mathematics. So only dialectic can do this. So what's dialectic? Is it just like discussion? You know, what exactly is he talking about here? So he takes us back to the divided line here. And there's a bit of a discussion in that, which we kind of skipped over a bit earlier on when we discussed the divided line, because he said, excuse me, that's where I'll just show it again here, in the right-hand side, so geometry, remember geometry moves, it's like images of forms to forms. So there's images of things to sensible things, and geometry is just like the images of the form. So you play around with your geometry because you're trying to transport yourself to the formal realm. Well, dialectic works only in the formal realm. Okay, and so there's a bit of a statement there where he says, in this section, Logos grasps by power of dialectic, using hypothesis to go as far as the unhypothetical first principle of everything, using no sense perception, but forms themselves, going through forms to forms and ending up at the forms. Now, this is a famous statement, and there's quite a few statements around here that people have mulled over a lot and wondered exactly what it meant. This unhypothetical first principle, what is that? So it's, this is also this is also the section again. This is the whole section of the divided line and the cave, and then just the sun analogy in general. And then this section again, here's the origins of Platonic mysticism. These are the key bits of text that have just burgeoned this whole tradition of Platonic mysticism. And I'll read a bit of his coy talk here from my translation here. It's 533, but I'll just read it out. My dear Glaucon, you won't be able to follow me any further, although my own effort would not be lacking in enthusiasm, and you'd no longer be looking at an image of what we're discussing, but the real thing. At any rate, as I see it, though whether it really is or not is not worth asserting anymore. But we must maintain rigorously that there is something like this to see. And likewise, the fact that the potential of the dialectic would only be revealed to someone with experience of what we're discussing, a thing that's possible in no other way. Only if you've experienced it can you appreciate the potential of the dialectic. So it's kind of really exclusive, isn't it? You know, and it'll turn a lot of people off saying, well, you know, you could say that about anything. So what does it mean? Well, what we do know here, at least, is that it operates with pure form or pure concepts, not with sensible things. So not like the geometry where we're starting with sensible things and moving to forms. So when we're talking about it being dialectic, So when you have the discussions, which we've had from the very beginning in the Euthyphro about what is justice and injustice, and then the very abstract sort of discussion about what is equality and inequality at the foundation of likeness and unlikeness, a very kind of elementary thing, greater or lesser, softer, harder, and so on. They are abstract concepts behind the particularity. So the dialectic operates there, and the idea is that in the discussion you can get to that. But also, Plato has some very specific ideas about how this should be practiced. But you can't know about them until you read some of the other later dialogues. So there we go. Okay, so I covered a lot there. Have we got any questions on any of that at all?
Sorry, Bernie, can I ask you something?
Yes, of course.
Is it true that Plato also talks about education in the Laws? I think I read some of that book. There's a section where he talks about education, the Laws.
Absolutely, absolutely he does. So in the Laws is quite long, and it extends really the Republic in terms of establishing laws for the society, although there's some great loops where he delves into so many other different things. But yeah, definitely. And it's definitely worth reading if you're interested in education, Con.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. Definitely.
That's my next one. What's the origin of the word dialectic? Like, it sounds like as if through saying or through reading from the Greek words, but how is Plato taking it?
Okay, so I'm trying to remember now. The origin is in a way important with a lot of these words, but also it's a particular way he used it, and it's very particular. But yeah. I think it means it means a discourse, you know, a backward and forward thing. I think that's the meaning of it, and I thought it meant discussion in that sense.
Literally, it would be through talking. So yeah.
Yeah, so the way we think of it, you know, oh, well, I actually don't know. Do people, it's like a dialogue, dialectic.
Plato's terms, the way he specifically uses the dialogues by drawing people out of themselves, by tantalizing them, and by giving small examples and hypotheses, is that his particular style of dialogue, is that crucial?
Okay. So as I intimated, it's a big question what he means by dialectic here. So firstly, the first thing to say is that the very ordinary and low-level sense in which people understand Plato as meaning dialectic, it would be as in what goes on in the dialogues. So what went on in the, you know, the Socratic dialogues, what goes on there. Okay, so you have this discussion which is aimed at the truth. So it's not, he uses a word, argumentation, antilogia, I love that, yeah. So it's not argumentation, it's not the combative thing, it's investigating together to try to find the truth. Okay, so that's the low-level sense of it, right? But what's really interesting is that actually in the later dialogues, and it starts earlier, but in the later dialogues, he comes to very specific practices of the dialectic, and we're presuming the sort of practices that would be on that right side of you know, the extreme side of the divided line. And these practices are developed especially in the dialogue called the Sophist, which is the dialogue that follows on from Theaetetus, if I pronounce that correctly. So the Sophist is really important for the advanced ideas of what the dialectic is all about. And also I would argue, and I think a lot of people would agree, depending on their interpretation, there's many interpretations of the Parmenides, I would say the Parmenides is also there as well. Because what he talks about in the Republic is what you've got to do to really get to the form of forms. And you can see how elusive it is from the quotes I read out and some of the other quotes that we've seen. He says, you've got to destroy hypotheses. Geometry starts with hypotheses and gets to its conclusion, but what you've got to do in this dialectic is you've got to destroy the hypotheses in order to get to this first principle.
So like the Socratic dialogues are a lower form of dialectic, there's a higher, more mature, sophisticated form which you would regard as dialectic.
What he's doing, I suppose, is narrowing, sorry?
It's still a process, dialectic?
Yeah, he's actually narrowing the definition. So I'll give you a bit of an idea of that. And this is really important. So thanks for bringing it up, Martha. One of the ways it narrows down is it's about how do we find out what justice means? How do we get to a definition of something? And you think of definition and the words that are used, it's all about delimiting. And we think again of our island and sea, sort of how do we find the shoreline? You know, how do we define something? And so the process of dialectic, as in the Socratic dialogues from the first one we did in our first class, Euthyphro, is defining, trying to define what piety is, abandoned. Trying to find what justice is, abandoned. A lot of times the definition is abandoned. So it's about doing that. But he does start narrowing it down in the way that I've been leading you, I suppose. There's been a bit of, confess that I've been leading you on a little bit with this same other thing, because the same other thing, the island and the sea thing, the othering sort of thing, the way things generate by othering, the alternation, you know, he just brings up that generation by alternation. What does he mean? That othering thing becomes very important and core to the process, the practice that takes you into this advanced dialectic, which he describes most in the Sophist, and then most perplexingly, I don't know whether you've heard, the Parmenides is the most difficult dialogue, and it's, people have wondered forever really what it's all about. Those two dialogues develop the dialectic method in an advanced way in this realm on the extreme right of the divided line.
I think it's really good that you put the process there, Bernie, because at least in the Republic, there is no dialectics as a noun. It is presented as a verb, as an action. And I think dialogism, which is very akin to contemplation, dialogismos, rather than dialogus, dialogue, which is that inner contemplation and examination and questioning.
It's totally a process, isn't it, Maria?
Yeah,
I mean, there's no question about it that he's saying this is a process. And it's also, if you like, in the mystical sense, a way, you know, a Tao, a Tao or a Tao or whatever, you know, those words. This is a way. And Plato's way is very heady, right? And this is what perhaps, you know, some of my Eastern mystic friends sort of say, you know, got to do hard stuff. This is Plato's very heady in his mysticism. His mysticism is this practice which involves words and involves thinking and involves all this stuff to get to the unthinking source. And in a way that might also be a criticism. Oh, thanks, Con. Yeah.
Have you read C.S. Lewis? Have you read him, Bernie?
Read who, sorry?
Have you read C.S. Lewis?
Oh, I've read some C.S. Lewis, yeah.
Very good. He was a Platonist.
He was, very much so. Yeah, a Christian Platonist, wasn't
Very
he?
good man, C.S. Lewis. God bless him.
Yeah, okay. So any more questions about dialectic? Yep. And anything about the sciences too, the mathematical sciences and the geometry and that sort of thing. We can discuss that if you like as well.
How involved did Plato get with astronomy? Did he sort of get beyond his solid geometry?
Yeah, well, I don't exactly know how much Plato got involved in it, and we only know secondhand what really went on. But the Platonists were very important in the history of astronomy in making it a mathematical practice. In the so the ancient, as I understand it, in the Egyptian and Babylonian background, they were very good at predicting, you know, the solstice and things like. Well, that goes right back, doesn't it? You know, we all know that from the very ancient barrows and all that sort of thing, where they could predict where the light fell on the solstice and all that. So, but they actually did mathematical. About the revolving spheres in the sky. Of course, it was all Earth-centric, not sun-centric, and it was all circles and not ellipses. It was actually another Platonist, Kepler, who brought in the ellipses and basically solved the essential problem so that then Newton could bring in his gravity thing and make it all work. So now in terms of how advanced Plato got, I'm not exactly sure, but the Platonists introduced this, this mathematics of the rotation cycles and epicycles, which then became the Ptolemaic universe, which reigned supreme until Copernicus, well, until the science, until after Copernicus really, really until Newton. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank
Was
you.
Aristarchus a Platonist, Bernie? Because he was the first to do the heliocentric universe.
Who was that?
Aristarchus.
Okay. No, I don't think so. From ancient Greek times.
It's before Plato's time, wasn't it? I'm getting confused with the times. Yeah.
Whether he was Pythagorean or not, he probably might have been. We can look that one up easily.
Yeah.
We can look that up. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else before we go over to myth of Earth?
Can I add something, I think, about dialectics? I'm not sure. It pertains to the subject that's been discussed as well. So the dialectics refers to anything of the higher virtues. Yes or no? I don't know. I just, it doesn't, yeah.
Okay, so I've actually had a bit of a look at all Plato's mentions of dialectic throughout his entire dialogues, and it's really interesting because the common view about what Plato means by dialectic is really distorted. And one of the distortions that outsiders get is that the term has been used a lot since, including by Hegel, famously by Hegel. And he's got a particular use of that, and that's the common one in philosophy today. When you talk about dialectic, people actually immediately start thinking of Hegel's version. So in terms of what Plato, how Plato uses the term and defines it, he's quite specific about this, that it can be, it is the dialogue, it's the search for the truth. So working together and searching for the truth, that's the broad meaning. But then there's specific practices. So it's searching for definitions. So you want to define concepts, you want to define forms. And then there's particular practices that he'll then use to define those forms. Now, and then there's a very specific dialectic that can only work on the extreme right-hand side of our divided line. And there are only a couple of practices that he elaborates there. which is called, one is called, I translate it as diaresis, and the other is basically contradiction. It's basically what happens in the Parmenides, where you just put one thesis and then you argue it absolutely convincingly, and then you argue the opposite thesis exactly convincing, and you do that over and over again and again. And that's what happens in the Parmenides, like 4 times, just right through it. And it's all about the one and the many, and it's the one many and all that sort of thing. It's absolutely crazy. So there's the diaresis, and there's this contradiction sort of method that are his 2 higher methods of dialectic. And they're fascinating.
If I may just go back a step, please, Bernie. I just want to. Aristarchus came after Plato. He was between 310 and 230 BC, and proposed that the Earth rotates as one of the planets, and like them orbits the sun, whilst the stars are at immense distance from us, puts forward correct technique to measure distance to sun and moon. That's Aristarchus. That was
thanks, Kula. Yeah, I remember that he was
after
the heliocentric, but I wasn't. I mixed my dates. I wasn't sure whether he was before or after.
Okay,
was he the one that worked out the circumference of the Earth?
Yes, he was the one.
Like he was
the well, the shadow in the well.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thanks for that, Kula. So our last question before we go on to myth of Ur. Anyone got anything else? We can have some questions during drinks if you like. All right, Effie, let's go.
Okay.
All right. Will I put your slides up, Effie?
Yeah, one at a time though. So
yeah, do you want me to put the first one up now, or will you just give me the hoy?
No, I'll just give an intro first. So yeah, I've kind of taken your advice, and I'm going to do the best I can. I'm not very good at this, so be patient with me. So the myth of Ur is actually the last part of the Republic. And so it finishes the questions raised in the Republic, which is what is justice, or what would a society or individual be if they were just. And he talks about just rewards in this world. He then goes on and says that that is nothing compared to the just rewards or punishments that the soul receives. And Socrates refers to the myth of Ur. Ur died in battle, but his body was intact and he was returned home. The whole process took 12 days, and that's quite relevant. He was put on the pyre to be burnt, but then he came back to life. And he told the story of what happens to the soul after we die. And he was told to come back and share everything he saw. And so I'm not go into too much details on the second half, but I'll explain the first half a little bit more. The first journey that the soul goes on, it journeys to a mysterious region. We can put it up, Bernie. And in this region, there is heaven above and earth below. And there's 2 holes in heaven, and directly below there's 2 holes as well. And the souls of the dead, if you have been just, you will go up to the heavens. So you will go upwards and towards the right hole. And if you've been unjust, you will go downwards and towards the left hole. But Ur also noticed that souls were coming back from the earth and from the heaven, and also meeting in this region. The ones returning from the under earth would come up looking ragged and dirty and dusty, and the ones from the upper region coming down were always happy and clean and healthy. So they met there for 4 days, and the souls discussed with each other about what was happening in the under earth and the above the heaven. And they realized that for every good deed and for every bad deed, you will receive your rewards tenfold by 100 years. So you can spend up to 1,000 years for each sin or each good deed, either in heaven or in the under earth. It's pretty harsh punishment for every bad thing we do, really. Is everyone still with me?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
They said that the ones that suffered most of all were the tyrants, the people that killed, that abused the gods and killed family and hurt themselves. The tyrants might not ever come back. They may be stuck in the under earth forever. Anyway, from there, they then, and the other thing is when they meet there and they come back and they're going to go on another journey, they sort of become equal again. So they move on now and walk for about, from the 4th day to the 12th day, they walk to another region. We can put the other one up. Okay, so this is the, so they see this spindle and these orbits, and there's 8 of them. And I'm not going to go into detail too much because he describes them at length. He describes their colors, their speed, their relationship to each other, how big they are, how small they are, how they fit in. On top of it is the goddess, the primordial goddess, necessity, or in Greek, anagi. And at the bottom, moving the spheres, are the fates, the mires, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. Anyway, so the next part of that. So they go there and all of a sudden a prophet appears, but we don't hear much about him, which is a bit strange because they give details about everything else, but not about the prophet. And the prophet goes up to Lachesis, that's the fate that's responsible for allotting things that were. And the priest picks up lots from her lap and throws them on the ground, and all the lots have numbers. And the person that picks the first number has a first choice to pick a model that will outline the pattern of his life. He can choose any pattern he wants. It can be of any wealth, any glory, any poverty, any health. It can change in the middle of the lifetime. He's got the right to choose. And so they all choose according to, like, the one that picked the second lot chooses second. And describes people choosing their patterns of their next life based on what happened in previous lives. For example, I have an example here somewhere. Orpheus chose to be a swan because he hated women, because his mother had killed him, and he didn't want to be born for a woman. But he gives many examples where people actually pick their lives but based on past experience. They thought this was very limiting. Finally, Odysseus gets the last lot, and he gets to pick his life from whatever patterns are left over. And Odysseus, because he remembered, he was wise and he remembered, he decided to pick the life that was the most just. And in order to pick the most just life, he decided to pick the life of an ordinary man who minded his own business. This life had been neglected by the others, but Odysseus was wise enough to know that this was the most just life to live. After picking their lot, they drank from the water of forgetfulness. So one of the warnings is when you drink from the water, oh no, they ended up in a region that was very dry, so they needed to drink. The more you drank, the more you forgot. And Odysseus didn't drink too much, apparently. So in the middle of the night, there was thunder and the earth moved and the soul was reborn. And that's how we come into existence, after having selected our own pattern of life. So Socrates finishes the Republic by saying, this is the most important choice one has to make, and we should put most of our efforts into being able to remember that when it comes our turn to choose our life, to choose the most just life, which is a life that is measured and is doing your own duty and minding your own business. And that's it. But it's actually quite beautiful. And the description of the different regions, especially the second one with the goddesses and the fates, is remarkable. Like, it's just like talking about the galaxies in a way I think science hasn't even got close to coming to yet. So that was
and
it.
it's also the harmonies, because there are sirens on each orbit, and there is a sound, and there are 8 orbits, so you have a scale, a perfect scale, and then the fates themselves also sing in the tune of the sirens. So this is all about the harmonious
harmony, yeah. And
Isn't
in that handout, the sirens are there, and it's actually very clearly describes what is written in the Republic. The hand that the fates use to turn the spheres is in the diagram. And it's there's so much detail in that, it's mind-boggling, which is why it surprises me that it doesn't say anything about the prophet or the priest that gives them the lots and gives them instructions.
Yeah, Lachesis turns it with her right hand on one way, Clotho turns it in the other way, and then Atropos, I think, uses both hands, and the one is for the past, the other one is the present, and Atropos is for the future. I thought that very, very, very interesting, and I find a lot of similarities with, not so much with Christianity, on the contrary, with Buddhism, because it's just reincarnation, and it's so like, it's karma. It's the law of karma. You've done good deeds, you will be rewarded. You've done bad deeds, well, you have to expunge those bad deeds by, being reincarnating again and again, and being punished during those reincarnations. I mean, even the orbits, you have 8 orbits. Well, in the wheel of suffering in Buddhism, you have 5 or 6 realms, according to some. So it's I find that very very profound, and but I don't know. I don't think that any of this is being taken by the Christian fathers of the church, of the scripture. I don't think that they.
I think half of it has, in regards to
there were heresies,
you'll be punished in the other life, or you'll go to heaven or hell. They never talk about it coming back, though.
Well, not the reincarnation, the continuance, and actually there is no stop. I mean, how can you stop being reincarnating? There is a solution perhaps in Buddhism, in Hinayana Buddhism. You reach nirvana. In Mahayana, yes, the same, but if you are really an enlightened being, you're gonna become reincarnated and come back and save the others. I think there was a sect called, a Christian sect called, I don't know how to say it in English, Ibavligani. There were monks, and they would pray sitting cross-legged and focusing on the belly button, which is supposed to be the center of the earth, and they would meditate. Of course, they did not survive for much, for a very long time, for obvious reasons. But this was, and I found that quite poetic and interesting, also from the scientific point of view. Like Mars, it has a red color, and hey, it's the red planet, isn't it? And it's something that was written 2,500 years ago, and without having the instrumentation that we have nowadays.
Well, what about we say you pay for everything here? This is where you pay here.
This is hell.
Yes, this is where you pay.
I think
And
Socrates.
this is a common thing. And there's the story of the king who calls the philosopher and says, you know, I want you to write a poem about the happiest man on earth. Me, I've got all the riches. So, and then the philosopher shows him the man who, oh, I'll show you the happiest man in the world. And he shows him a simple man who's got, who's raised his children. He's satisfied, and he said, this is the happiest man in the world. And of course, you know the story, but this is this idea of, you know, you'll get punished. Well, I think we pay for everything here, one way or another.
Yeah, I think Socrates actually says that in the prelude, that we pay for everything here in the material sense, but then the soul goes through its own journey. So the I, the me, Effie, will pay for everything here, but the soul will suffer tenfold. And I suppose in regards to being in heaven forever, the more good you do, you get paid tenfold by 100 years. So you can, if you're really good, you can be there for a really long time.
1,000 years to be punished and 1,000 years in heaven.
Well, and then some people, and I think some people don't.
Sound fair to me. You only get 10 years for murder or 15 years for murder. I don't think that's what we'd call just to be punished for eternity, you know, for maybe, you know, being jealous of the person next door or something.
Yeah. So the actual discussion goes right back to Thrasymachus in the very first book, if you remember me telling you about that, where he says the idea, he comes up and he says, well, come on, you know, it's a bit like Nietzsche, really. The just are just the suckers, you know, the unjust are the ones that actually get on and get all the rewards and everything. And so Plato then brings it back, and I've left out what all the reading was on, and maybe we can talk about it in the drinks. But in this, he sort of comes back with a double whammy. He says that, well, actually the just are the happiest. And the philosopher is the happiest because the philosopher focuses on the forms and has wisdom, and that's a real solid good and really satisfying, whereas the other sort of pleasures are mere illusions and that sort of thing. So he says a double whammy. He says that not only in this life do you get the reward for being just, but also, as Effie's just told us, in the next life you get that reward. So, you know, there's pretty good rewards for being a good person.
Now, I really like that a just life is minding your own business. It's such a it seems so simple, yet he considers it as one, and looking after your duty. He says to do your duty. Shakespeare says something similar too. To do your duty and mind your own business is the most important thing. That's, you know, it's actually quite simple when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. Hey folks, I'm going to go and grab my wine now. If anyone else wants to grab their wine, and let's just continue the conversation. So you might already have your drink, I should say.
Can I just say, when I was drawing the original diagram, it actually amazed me how much it looked like an infinity sign, like a figure 8.
Yeah.
It just kept turning over and over. Yeah. The way he's done it. And you know, if you do the infinity sign, we always go up towards the right and then down towards the left. So I thought that was a bit, yeah.
I would have to say personally, I dislike the term mind your own business. I think it's very, to me, it sounds selfish, uncaring, and not being interested in other people or in their welfare. So it's just a bad phrase for me.
It might be
of what we've been reading. It's doing your job well, but it also is suggestive of doing it in a silo rather than as a community and watching and looking out for others.
I thought about that for a long time. I think if your duty is to help others, then that is your duty. But to mind your own business means that you don't look at what the other person is doing to see, like it.
It's not.
I can work it out what it's meant, but I've got to shake my own concept of mind your own business.
Yeah.
Too insular. But if you expand that, as you say, and minding your own business, taking that as your duty, if you like, as a health professional, doing my business well is caring about people. But yeah, I've got to kind of expand my original definition of mind your own business to what you're proposing. Then it works.
But that may not necessarily be lack of compassion or not being interested in your fellow human being. I see it as doing the best that I can and focusing on what I'm doing and not criticizing others. That's how. In order to avoid conflict, we concentrate on
getting that from Effie's definition, and that's what I would broaden mine to, from being very.
Yeah, if I could throw in a bit harder on Martha's side. I mean, I worry that the mind your own business could be used by a totalitarian state. It's just go back in the factory and do your work and do it well, while I rule, I rule like a tyrant, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Whereas liberal society, you're allowed to, the idea is to a certain extent, you sort of say, well, hang on a sec, I don't think this is fair, or what about these people who are being abused and that sort of thing. So it does worry me. It does worry me reading the Republic that if you put it into place, it could be abused very easily.
But the classes too are, there is no movement between the classes, is there? Like the caste. So that is a worrying thing. You have 3 classes with very little movement, if any. And yeah.
A little generational movement, intergenerational movement. Yeah, not much at all. So it actually reminds me of English society. I mean, English society in the 19th century or something, they were always very good at keeping the classes separate. But then when they got some brilliant person from and managed to come through, not always, they would send them to Cambridge or something and, and involve them in you've arrived now, have a cigar, It's very important to keep society stable rather than saying, no, you can't come up, because then they'll run and revolt or whatever.
That's a good point.
Okay, should we have a toast to Plato or something?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I've got some ouzo for this.
Who wants
Oh,
to mousse?
No, hang on a second.
Where's the turn?
Now, Hume, I presume you were going to bring the single malt out.
Oh, that's for Maria. This is mine, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so here's to...
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Here's the Play-Doh.
Good, excellent session,
Here's,
Bernie.
cheers.
Can I just make a suggestion, perhaps? I would have loved to have had one more session to go into depth and discuss more about the imperfect societies and his, Plato's theories of the art and the painter and the poet. Like one more instead of having 6 to have session. I mean, just a suggestion, because
Do you think one more would do it? Do you think?
well, it would give us at least an insight, because
No.
we hardly discussed about tyranny or
well, we didn't.
democracy and all that, and I mean, other than your introduction. I mean, just
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I thought I was doing really well, and I thought, oh my God, I've ripped out this week's reading. And there is also the going back again, which I should have mentioned, the going back again to the whole thing about art, where he makes, it's like an appendix, that last book, where the myth of is right at the back. And the main bulk of it is all about representational art is bad, because representational art, whether it's a play like this, like his plays, or whether it's a painting or whether it's a poem, it's representing sensible things, which is another step away again from the forms. So we want to get rid of all the representational art because we want to be closer to the forms. Nice in a monastery, but I'm not sure in a society. So yeah, we could do more. I kind of feel like, I think we could probably do, if we did again, we could even do Republic Part 1, 6 weeks, and Republic Part 2, 6 weeks. But it's kind of good sometimes to be really tight about it. I don't know. We stuffed up. We went out of time last week, and it's really pushed us now. And yeah, it was really tight to try and fit all this stuff in. So yeah, we can rethink it, Maria, and you can certainly be involved in the rethink. Yeah.
Stuffing up was good though, because we had interesting conversations, and that's how you learn, and especially when you're dealing with such difficult subjects, and you have to go on and on again. I mean, thank God for that, because every time you explain the forms and you give another example, then there's, oh yeah, okay, I'm grasping a little more, or what people bring up during the discussions. It all helps to put it together. And
yeah, and look, I think, like, when you think about it, when you go back and have a look at it, you think, why wouldn't you spend 1 week on Divided Line and another week on the cave? You could easily push it out, because we didn't really discuss much around the cave, did we? We did a bit on the Divided Line, but we didn't do the cave. So you could push it out a lot more and get more discussion in too. So that's a tip for next time. Or maybe we could just do it all over again.
Yeah, I could do it again. Easy.
Actually, at the beginning of the piece, which we started at Tyranny, and then he describes, a child who is sort of not disciplined or not taught properly, and then and then the child goes to school and tyrannizes the teachers. I thought, sometimes when I read bits of what Plato wrote, I think, I can't believe this was written 2,500 years ago. because
Yeah.
it's so, but also, you know, a lot of what was said at the beginning of that piece that we read is so, you know, what we're seeing today is in a democracy where we're given lots of rights and freedoms, but we forget about other people's rights. And you know, the thing that's come up recently about how they behave, you know, during this this pandemic, and how people sort of demand their rights, but haven't properly considered other people's, the welfare of other people's, you know. So I'm demanding my right to go and visit my friends every day and take, you know, a lot of friends with me against the
It's a
rules.
bit of a tyrannical personality, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a very tyrannical, but you know, but that's my right. No one's got the right to tell me that I can't visit my friends. But and in the meantime, you may have done harm to a lot of people. And you know, he sort of describes.
But I think the thing is too. I mean, I thought about this a lot. That's like minding our own business, because it might be that you're doing harm to other people, but they're arguing that they're actually saving other people because they don't believe any of this, and they've got the right to do that, right? So it's opening up a can of worms. So I mean, I'm a law-abiding citizen, so I follow the law, but I've got my own view, and I respect people that make a stance against the government. I respect it.
Well, that's
Yeah,
well, like the principle of liberty, isn't it? Look,
Yeah.
can I just cut it around? I'm feeling a bit bad that I didn't introduce it, and so maybe I could just give a quick riff on introducing the topic. So it won't take long. So he's got this kind of these 4 types of imperfect government: the timarchy, which is really like the Spartan-style military society; the oligarchy, which is based on wealth; democracy, which privileges liberty and freedom; and then tyranny, which is basically, he ends up saying, is based on the basest desires. The basest desires come out and emerge, including unleashed, untamed eros, which is interesting. And then he brings in a 5th sort of society, which is a kingdom, or an aristocracy, which is, he aligns with the philosopher ruler. And when he then describes all these, it's kind of like a devolution, where he moves from aristocracy to tyranny, to oligarchy, and to democracy. And then he particularly spends quite a bit of time describing how democracy devolves from, tyranny devolves from democracy. But there's also, as Kula was pointing out just then, the psychosocial alignment, so that for every one of these standard types, there's mixtures, he says, but standard types of society, there's also a personality type that's associated with it. So we're getting, once again, that psychosocial alignment, which we've been getting all the way through. Now, with democracy, what happens is that liberty is privilege, freedom, everyone wants freedom and stuff. And even the leaders say, yeah, you know, I'm not going to be really authoritarian. And what happens, according to Plato, is that it starts unraveling into anarchy. And then there is, and he describes it's a bit like swinging between opposites. So once you overgo one way, it swings back another. And hey, have we seen a bit of that recently? And so then he talks about it in a general oscillation sort of principle, like the seasons. You know, you go from winter, it swings way over to winter and then swings back to summer. Well, politics can be a bit like that. And so what he says is that the great liberty of democracy swings back to the subjugation by tyranny. And the way this happens is that when into the anarchy, the wealthy, powerful, wealthy people step in to try to solve the problems. And then they're accused of being oligarchs. And then because of the reaction of the people, they actually become oligarchs or behave like oligarchs. And out of this, there is the people's hero, the populism emerges, what we now call populism. The people's hero comes through, and that people's hero devolves into the tyrant. So the tyrant slowly camps down harder and harder, purges his lieutenants, and then instigates wars and all the rest. So yeah, that's probably, yeah. So that's pretty much it. So I've done it now. So yeah, any comments on that?
Yes, there's while I was reading these passages, I remembered Christos Tsiolkas' book, The Slap, and Hugo, and how this child who was given all the freedoms, he was given all the liberties. It was, you know, he was totally unrestrained, and he became a horrible little monster. And right at the end of the book, you see him crossing the street, and for no reason at all, he hit the old man who was, you know, sort of struggling to get across the street, and he knocked him over. But this is what you know, Hugo had become, because he was, and I thought to myself, I bet Christos was quite familiar with Plato, because, you know, it was almost, you know, his character Hugo was almost.
Yeah, I got the same connection called. Well,
You didn't make that connection.
Yeah, it's funny that. Yeah. Anyone else got any?
You didn't make that connection, or you never ever did?
I did. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking the barbecues I used to go to with little children were exactly the same thing. The politics of those barbecues.
I thoroughly enjoyed the passage on tyranny. Enjoyed well. Yeah, I found it a very interesting, and it brought in front of me a lot of things that are happening now, and I think, wow, again, 2,500 years, hasn't anything changed? Haven't we learned anything? I mean, even when he talks about the money lenders and how awful these people can be, and you want to buy a house and they charge a lot of interest and this and that, down to the tyrant, you know, where there is he needs a personal bodyguard. He throws away his friends because he can trust no one, and he's so sure of what he says. And
Gosh, it sounds like
exactly. I mean, it's happening. Yeah.
We're not allowed to mention Trump. Let's mention Stalin instead. What about Stalin?
Okay. There are plenty of examples, and unfortunately, of this type of personality, and I mean, of course, in some sections it is exaggerated, but the trend and the deterioration and what's happening, I think it's there, and it stands true.
I'm going to be leaving everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Effie. Lovely to see you again at this. And will we see you at the next one?
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's lovely.
Have a good break. Bye.
You too. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Yeah, Maria, I thought it's that evolution thing, even whatever the particulars of it are, you know, and what may and may not happen, but that kind of, and the oscillations, you know, you go to one extreme and then you come back to the middle, and you know, all that stuff was, it's I don't know, I think for us all, it's astonishing that at that time,
Yes.
They even had the subject matter to actually consider in that way. You know, democracy or politics was quite advanced in that time in terms of experimenting with different ways of governing people and how they would set a constitution in a colony or something in a particular way, and then how that would slowly change into something completely different. You know,
Wasn't Pericles an example of that? I mean, he started off being a very popular leader of Athens, and then towards the end, he was exiled. Is that correct?
The majority were, and then they were coming back, and Alcibiades, he came back, and then he went and aligned himself with the Spartans, and then he went and aligned himself with the Persians, and this actually describes that, like the tyrant, he will be doing that, and actually that's how revolutions take place.
Pericles in particular, because he was so instrumental in creating Athens and the Parthenon, etc. And then there was the tides turned because people thought he got too powerful, and so that seems to follow this model that Plato talks about.
But I wouldn't call Pericles a tyrant.
No.
Would you? I mean,
definitely not. Yeah.
Well, did he rule alone?
I don't know.
Yeah. The other prediction, of course, ahead of Plato's time is the Roman Empire, the way it went from democracy to
yes, very good one.
Well,
yes.
actually, who is in the Hellenic community? Because tomorrow night, Dean Galimios is doing a lecture on the Garland pandemic, which and I looked up that, and I looked it up in Wikipedia, and to all accounts, it seems to me like that epidemic is what actually brought down the Roman Empire in the first century, in the common second century in the Common Era, and you know, like 60% of populations died, and the actual pandemic in the Roman army sort of weakened the army considerably, and the Germans, I don't know what they were, whoever occupied that area at the time, were coming, sort of moving south, and they were, and actually, you know, some historians have talked about the decadence of the Roman Empire is what brought it down, and it seems to me that it was actually the pandemic that brought down the Roman Empire, and it was now archaeologists are saying it was a pandemic that led to the collapse of the Bronze Age. And, you know, we all sort of looking at, you know, things differently at the moment. But anyway, that's on tomorrow night.
Is it tomorrow night or Thursday?
Thursday night.
Sorry. Yeah. Thursday. Yeah. So I think that will be that'll be very, very interesting. And anyone can, you know, if you register, you can attend.
Oh, thanks, Kula. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, those seminars are really good.
Yeah.
Dean writes in the Neos Cosmos. He writes, I think it's called Diet.
Yeah.
In the English section.
I don't know how he has, you know, he does these lectures. He's a historian, he's a journalist, but you know, he's also a lawyer. And I don't know how, you know.
Maybe he's good at delegating.
Yeah. And he's done quite a few of those lectures I haven't always agreed with everything he says, but he's definitely always got something interesting to say.
Right. Oh, that's great. Is everyone looking forward to the people who are doing Platonic Love? Looking forward to it? So
Yes.
you read the Symposium or the Phaedrus? David's read the Phaedrus. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that book, The Platonic Love, in the Symposium? Is it?
Oh no, sorry.
No.
It's just our title.
Oh,
But it's okay. I hope you don't mind the title. We can change it.
No, it's a good one. No, it's a good one.
it's a good one. Yeah.
We don't need to change everything.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's two dialogues we're looking at. One is the Symposium, the drinking party, and which features a conversation that Socrates supposedly had with Diotima, I think her name is, some goddess type woman who taught him everything he ever knew about love. And then there's the Phaedrus.
Xanthippe.
Say it again.
Lucky, very fortunate Xanthippe.
Yeah.
Had those lessons in love.
I know, but the rest of the thing is all about homoerotic love, so it's kind of funny, really. Yeah. And then you guys who like the myth of Air Whale, if you haven't read the Winged Chariots, well, you haven't lived.
Careful what you're saying there, Bernie.
What do you mean by that, Maria?
What was that one about the chariots?
So in the Phaedrus, there's this other myth, the myth of the description of the kind of the soul as it's like a chariot riding with winged horses and riding and heading towards heaven, and then the wings fall off, and then you become human, or otherwise, if you keep going up, you reach nirvana. Yeah, you reach the noetic realm. So, but it's a very evocative, very lyrical and rich allegory. Mm.
Is there a mention of Atlantis in the book? That I know that there is a lot in Critias, but why do I have the notion that either in the Symposium or on the Phaedrus there is mention of the Atlantis? I mean, as I said, we're talking decades here. I'm not going to say how many, but.
Where's Atlantis? I thought it was in the Republic, actually. But
In one of them.
I can't remember where Atlantis is. Oh, it's in the Atlantic Ocean. That's right. Yeah, no, I was reading it recently.
It's Santorini or Gibraltar.
Oh, is that it? Oh, we worked it out. Oh, I thought it was like the earthquake in Crete or something.
Yeah.
Hmm. So anyone know where Atlantis is? Gosh, I thought it was in the Republic, but it's not. We've read the whole bloody thing.
Somewhere.
Oh no.
No.
I think in Critias he says that it
Comes
starts
back to it in Critias.
from
Oh, it's in time.
the Gibraltar and
Yeah. It's in time
somewhere there. But then a lot of people think that it's
Really.
in the Minoan era and Santorini and the earthquake and the volcano and
Cycladic islands somewhere. But the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, they were concurrent.
But the Mycenaeans then sacked, didn't they? The Minoan, or they vanquished the Minoans by invading them.
After the eruption.
Yeah, talking about a natural catastrophe like the pandemic, because of that, the civilization was gone.
Yeah, did the Minoans do it, or did the volcano do it?
Or did the pandemic do it?
Or did the pandemic do it?
The pandemics did everything. Come on, it's got to be the flavor of the month. Pandemics caused this world. Yeah, so just to clarify there, of course, it's in the Timaeus, and then the Critias comes back to it again. Yeah, Critias kind of follows on from the Timaeus. So if anyone's looking for Atlantis, other than in the ocean, it's in the Timaeus.
Any chance of us doing the Timaeus?
Of course, it's amazing.
How long's it?
It will be extremely interesting because there is a lot of I haven't read the book, and but there are a lot of references in the footnotes and things like that this is mentioned in Timaeus. This is
well, it kind of gets back to what Mary was mentioning earlier with Christianity, the Timaeus, because it was very influential in medieval Christianity, because for a long time that was the only real Plato that they had. And so it very much, there's a description of like the creation of the physical world. So with Plato, there's this kind of emanation, which is like formal emanation, and it's kind of related to the noetic and the mind and that sort of thing. But in Timaeus, Timaeus gives this kind of like, well, this is, you know, this is how the world evolved, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And that was, some of that's quite boring, but it was influential in Christianity. It influenced various theories of physics, medieval physics, astrophysics. Okay. Yeah.
So do you see that as perhaps being done together, like starting with Timaeus and then continuing on with some other Christian sources? So does it have to stand alone?
We could talk about that. I mean, I think we tried to squeeze too much into the Republic. So it might be okay. It might be okay. I can have a look at it just to do the Timaeus on its own.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I have to think about that. You're thinking maybe Timaeus and then some Christian sources. Yeah, could do.
Yeah.
Could do.
If it's possible, I'm happy to do it by itself.
Well, it might be good to do it in Mary suggested to, you know, it could be a theme within Plato and Platonist influences on Christianity. It could definitely be a theme there.
You know, the myth of and the chariots that you were talking about. Is there any chance, do you think, that was that it was meant as a metaphorical sort of piece to sort of talk about, you know, this is how, you know, this is how we live, and you know, sort of metaphorical about the judgments that that we sort of live on Earth.
Yeah, look, you're opening really up a whole I was going to say can of worms, but a whole interesting area there, Kula. I mean, how do you interpret these myths in Plato, and how do you interpret them in the Bible, in fact? So in Plato, it's interesting with the evidence from Plato himself. Like earlier on in the Republic, he talked about getting rid of all these poems that tell these nasty stories about the gods, and let's create our own legends, which are noble lies. Let's create these noble lies that make people do good things. And then you go on a bit later and you get these myths that are all about what happens in the afterlife. So do you just interpret them as noble lies that make people do good things in the current world? And if I can just in the next breath go back to the Phaedo, and we remember when we did the Phaedo, right at the end, he tells this story again about the afterlife, and he says, oh, isn't that a nice story for someone to, I don't know whether any of this is true, but isn't this a nice story for someone to tell and to think about before they're about to die? And Socrates was about to die. So he's sort of like saying, it's a lullaby, as I say, it's a lullaby for the dying. let's tell the dying a lullaby about all these wonderful things that's going to happen to them after they die. So there's that. And I'll just throw in one more thing, Kula, before I stop, is that what happened with the Jews, a Jew called Philo, and then the early church fathers, especially in Alexandria, they went for allegorical interpretations of the Bible, and they went into an extreme extent about allegory. They weren't very interested at all that the Bible, and especially the Old Testament, the Jewish texts, were telling historical truths. They just read these amazing allegorical readings into them, like say, similar to like Oedipus, the story of Oedipus. Oh, someone's going. Okay.
Bye, Paloma.
Yeah. And the way Freud interprets Oedipus, you know.
Have to see you next time.
Okay.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
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 So yeah, allegorical interpretation was a very big thing at the in the early Platonism.
Mm. Interesting.
One thing that he doesn't mention is biology. I'm not going to hold that against him.
Oh, he was.
Aristotle tried and did a lot more.
He was waiting for Aristotle to.
Yeah. To meddle in all the sciences. Yeah.
They're your favorite science. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, should we wind it up then? Maybe, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Bernie. It was very, very interesting.
Oh,
yes. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, Bernie. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and thank David too. You know,
Thanks, David. Yes,
Thank you, David.
It's been great, and we'll thank Angus on your behalf too.
Yes.
Well, thank you for coming. We love talking about Plato, and we can only do it if you guys come. So yeah, if you've got any friends who are interested, and Mary,
three. You should hear from them. I've got 3 for the introduction.
Great.
Yeah.
Right, that's great. Okay, all right. Yeah. And I'm closing the bookings for tomorrow. I'm closing the bookings for Platonic Love because we've got 14, which is more than.
Oh, okay. Well done.
Oh, that's
an orgy of love.
That's a merry.
Well, Hume, it's lucky that we're virtual, isn't it?
Well, talking about pandemic, Bernie, you spread the Platonic germ here, and we got it big time. I'll tell you that, big time.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, I hope it keeps spreading because we need a bit more Platonism, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, see you, everyone.
See you, everyone. See you in September. Bye-bye.